I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for May the 8th, 2025. There is a lot happening in the world today, and indeed, I would not be surprised if a great number of you are not watching or listening to this live, and instead you catch the archived version, because what is the big news today? Habemos Papam, we have a pope. And indeed, getting ready for today's episode was a little rushed because, like so many hundreds of millions, I was watching the white smoke pour out of the Sistine Chapel, the announcement that not only do we have a new pope, Leo the 14th, but he's the first American pope. And we're going to be commenting on this further on in the news roundup. But there's going to be a lot of discussion in the next week or so regarding who Cardinal Robert Prevost is, what his views are. This was a total shock, I think, to a lot of people. Not one of the candidates I was expecting, and probably not you either. But I have to be honest, I am very, very relieved it's not John the 24th. And no, I'm not a huge fan of Roman Catholicism. I expect most of you all are not either, but this does affect us religiously in the world. It affects us politically, and certainly it affects us socially. All right, so let's get started on our theology roundup. And I'd like to start by directing you to our ministry's commentary, James for the Practical Messianic. This is something you can get a copy of at outreachisraelbookstore.com. James for the Practical Messianic. Do you notice anything different about this? Yes, it's the blue-green cover, which indicates it has recently been updated. And this is something which we just got online over the weekend. So the updated edition of James for the Practical Messianic is now available. And in our theological discussion, we're going to be reviewing James 2:14 through 24, and specifically the issue of justification as it appears there. Because there are many people who, when encountering James 2:14 through 24, believe that human beings can be saved by their external works. And so what was James the Just actually communicating to his ancient audience there? There is some kind of being justified or made righteous by works, but was it a being declared innocent from sins, being provided eternal salvation, or possibly was it something else? And this is not something we frequently discuss enough as today's Messianic people, yet it is definitely affluent in a great number of contemporary discussions and debates as seen in Protestant theology, particularly those who do not believe, and rightfully so, that James the Just and the Apostle Paul, who also spoke fluently about justification or being made righteous, that they were not at odds. And so it simply requires intelligent, responsible Bible readers to do a little more homework and investigate things in a little more detail. Okay, now I need to share the screen with my Bible software. Okay, you should be seeing that now. Okay, excellent. So, James 2, verses 14 through 24. This is in Logos, and going to be looking at these verses from the New American Standard. What use is it, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but has no works? Can that faith save him? So here, James is talking about the quality of a faith which lacks works. And of course, the answer is no. If someone just has faith, meaning some kind of a mental assent or some kind of a confession of belief, but there's no works which follow it, can that faith actually save a person? Where is the evidence of an internal transformation? James is quite clear in his epistle that those who claim to have faith but do not have works, that faith is useless. So the question is a legitimate one. What use is it? If someone says he has faith but he has no works, can that faith save him? That's a pretty meaningless faith. And here, James immediately goes into some of the obvious works expected of Messiah followers, those who profess Yeshua, his half-brother, no less. Verse 15, if a brother or sister is without clothing and in need of daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and be filled, and yet you do not give them what is necessary for their body, what use is that? Verse 16. So, what are some of the works, some of the actions James immediately goes into describing? Making sure that one's brothers and sisters in the faith community have the life essentials that all of us require. Be warmed and be filled. So have clothing, have food, but I'm not going to do anything necessary to help you. What use is that? Now, what's important to note is the works James immediately focuses on, because there are a lot of people in the Messianic sphere of influence. They'll say, if someone says he has faith, but he has no works, can that faith save him? And then they stop and then they say, yeah, like, are you keeping the Sabbath? Are you keeping kosher? Are you doing the feasts? James has a much different approach than that. Not that James would have said those are wrong, but here he focuses on some of the important aspects of human wholeness, the essentials of making sure that one's brothers and sisters have food, clothing, shelter. Those are some of the important works James required of his audience, which many were not performing. And we sometimes get challenged by the type of works James had in view here. We don't want to pay attention to it. We instead want to substitute our definition of works in our Messianic context, Shabbat, the festivals, kosher, something like that, something external, and we ignore the specific works James expected his audience to have. Helping others, making sure they have food, clothing, and shelter. Now, verse 17. Even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself. James required his audience, and we as Messiah followers are required as well, to make sure that we are facilitating those important outward works of human wholeness. And here is James' discussion. But someone may well say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without the works, and I will show you my faith by my works. Faith and works, one's professed belief in God and Yeshua, go hand in hand with external actions. You cannot separate the two of them. And indeed, there's no contradiction there with the teachings of Paul. Paul in Ephesians 2, 8 and 9. Salvation is not by works, but God has created us for good works. And indeed, believing in God, just professing faith is insufficient. James 2:19, you believe that God is one. You do well. The demons also believe and shudder. Simply making a profession of faith in the one creator God of the universe is insufficient, because even demons who cannot be redeemed in any way, shape, or form, they're eternally damned. They acknowledge God. They acknowledge the supremacy of the creator. And they can't do anything about it. They are eternally condemned. James 2:20, but are you willing, you foolish fellow, that faith without works is useless? And here you can see some of the other translations. The New Revised Standard, do you want to be shown, you senseless person, that faith apart from works is barren? The Tree of Life version, following the King James version, it appears, but do you want to know, you empty person, that faith without works is dead? So, simply confessing a belief in the one creator God, Yeshua the Messiah, absolutely inefficient if it is not also followed by some kind of external works. And this is where things get a little interesting, verses 21 through 24. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up Isaac his son on the altar? So this is where some, James has just said justified by works. Is he in contradiction to Paul, who said we're justified by faith? Verse 23, you see that faith was working with his works, and as a result of the works, faith was perfected. That often doesn't get probed enough. Faith and works have a symbiotic relationship. Abraham is attested here. The faith Abraham possessed was working with his works, and faith was perfected. The Revised Standard Version, you see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by works. The New International Version, you see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. So faith and works go together. You can't have one without the other. Now, this is where things get complicated. James 2:23, and the scripture was fulfilled, which says, and this is quoting from Genesis 15:6, got it right out of the Bible software, and Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. So many people conclude that, Abraham had works, Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness, i.e., he was saved by works. That's what many conclude because of verse 24. You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith alone. Oh, that's in contradiction to the Apostle Paul, who said that believers are justified by faith. James says you're justified by works, and obviously he must mean that people are given eternal salvation by works. After all, here you see an alternative version, the NIV. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. Doesn't that mean that we're saved by our works? Complete Jewish Bible, you see that a person is declared righteous because of actions and not because of faith alone. Even the Tree of Life, you see that a man is proved righteous by works and not by faith alone. And so many people can conclude, and I believe this is incorrect, that, if I have works, that proves that I am righteous, that proves that I have eternal salvation, that I'm forgiven from my sins. And this is where there is some significant theological debate, because do terms like justification or righteousness, the Hebrew tzedakah or the Greek dikaiosune, do they always mean a declaration of innocence, being declared free from sin, granted eternal salvation? Or can there also be some other possible uses of tzedakah dikaiosune, being justified or being made righteous? And indeed, many people are of the position that there are places, especially in Paul's letters, no less, but even in places like here in James, where the justification or righteousness, as would be seen frequently throughout the Tanakh, the Old Testament, is not necessarily a being declared innocent from sins. Rather, being justified or being made righteous in various places, and you have to look at the details to deduce what is in view, is a declaration, listen very carefully, a declaration of being in covenant status with God as a member of God's own. So throughout the Tanakh, for certain, when ancient Israel is described as being righteous or justified, that is a declaration that, of course, the people of Israel are in covenant status with the one God of Israel as his own. While many would debate it, there are places in Paul's letters in particular when he's having to wrestle with justification or being made righteous, in Galatians and in Romans, where a declaration of innocence from sins may not be in view. Rather, being made a member of God's own in covenant status with him instead is in view. And that has significant background in the Tanakh. Similarly, here in James 2:23 and 24, Abraham believed God and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. That's Genesis 15:6. And what is being reckoned to him as righteousness? What is that considered to specifically be? James tells us, and he was called the friend of God. James was regarded, Abraham was regarded as being in covenant status with God as a member of his own. When James applies Genesis 15:6, Abraham's faith was working with his works, and as a result of the works, faith was perfected. That's Abraham offering up Isaac. The scripture was fulfilled, which says, Genesis 15:6, and Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. And the righteousness is defined here as, and he was called the friend of God, not, and he was granted salvation. No, he was called the friend of God. He was in covenant status with God as a member of God's own. So when James here specifically says, you see that a man is justified by works and not by faith alone, it involves demonstrating oneself as a member of God's own. And sometimes we need to keep that in mind. We need to have some more of these theological investigations as Messianic people, where righteousness or justification need not always be a being declared innocent of sins and granted eternal salvation. There are definitely places in the Gospels and in the epistles where the justification or being made righteous in view involves that, but not always. And that is where we have to do more detailed homework. And this can be a challenge for a lot of people, especially those from the Reformed tradition, among others. All right, so to close this up just a bit, I've got to switch screens again. For you to investigate this a little more in detail, see what some theologians have said, how today's Messianics can approach this. Once again, we have our ministry commentary, James for the Practical Messianic, which has recently been updated for 2025. And you know that because it's got the bluish green cover. That's how you know if a commentary has been updated. Okay, there is a lot of news going on right now. And of course, for certain, the election of a new pope. Leo the 14th is going to be dominating a lot of the news over the next week or so as we figure out who Robert Prevost is. We know that he is a native of Chicago. He's going to be the first American pope. He had a ministry in Peru. We know he's a polyglot, so speaks English, speaks Spanish, speaks Italian. This will be rather interesting to see how that affects global Catholicism, whether you like Catholicism or not, and I don't particularly care for it. We know the Vatican is going to have a lot of influence over religion, over politics, as well as over just society. So non-believers, people who don't even believe in God or are nominally religious, they're going to be affected by Leo the 14th as well. Okay, so we do have some news. Some of this is current events. Some of this is religious. And yeah, there are a lot of things we need to be paying attention to. All right, this is from yesterday, May the 7th, from Newsmax. Vice President J.D. Vance said on Wednesday the Trump administration wanted Russia and Ukraine to agree on some guidelines for talking to each other directly, which Vance said would be necessary to end the war. And of course, right now, there are a lot of dignitaries, most notably Chinese President Xi Jinping. They are all going to Moscow at the invitation of Vladimir Putin to commemorate the end of World War II, the Great Patriotic War, as it was known in the Soviet Union. A lot of speculation, are the Ukrainians going to attack during some of the parades and some of the ceremonies or not? But yeah, the vice president says Russia and Ukraine need to talk to each other directly if we're going to see this conflict end. And we just continue to wait and see what is going to happen. All right, our next story, and this is a religious story. This came across my feed on Instagram yesterday from Jewish Voice Ministries. That's Jonathan Bernis. This is a very short clip. There are a lot of people out there in certainly Hebrew roots, one law, whatever. They've got some ideas that, you know, all Messianic Jews or Messianic Jewish leaders are opposed to non-Jewish people partaking of outward things of Torah. And that's just simply not true. So here you see a short clip about the issue of the law, you know, Messianic Jewish believers doing Shabbat, the seventh-day Sabbath. They emphasize that it's something that Jesus himself did. There are a lot of benefits that non-Jewish people can have by remembering Shabbat, and they need to remember that believers are not under the law. That doesn't mean that they don't have to adhere to any set of principles. According to Bernis here, the law is not some heavy burden or heavy weight placed on our shoulders, which is consistent, of course, with my view that being under the law is being subject to its condemnations and penalties. Those who are in Messiah are, of course, under grace, meaning that the penalties of the Torah have been remitted for those who are in him. Okay, this came across my feed. This is from the TikTok channel. Hello, Mrs. Rachel. So Rachel Welch, we referred to her post, which went viral last Monday. It had almost 250,000 views. This is her post talking about how Messianic Jews are not Christians. And what does she mean by that? So, you know, she's obviously a Messianic Jewish believer. What does she mean by saying that Messianic Jews are not Christians? And of course, is it just because they don't use the terminology Christian? They don't adhere to any kind of theology which can be described as evangelical. So watch this. This TikTok will be seen to actually affirm various evangelical Protestant truths, things like the triunity of God, things like that. But it also emphasizes how the term Christian is loaded for someone who is Jewish. A Jewish believer calling himself or herself a Messianic Jew means that he or she is still part of the Jewish community and is still fighting for the right to live and breathe as a Jew. And that's something which can definitely be lost on a lot of people who are outside of the Messianic Jewish community, and they find themselves more in Hebrew roots or one law, one Torah. They forget that there are a lot of people who, when they see a Jewish person acknowledge Yeshua as Savior, well, you stop being a Jew, you start being a Christian, and you're supposed to assimilate. And we're all 100% the same. And that's not true. Yes, we should focus on elements of common faith first, but the Jewish experience is one people need to take note of. And for a lot of non-Jewish people in the Messianic community, I remember, because I can identify more along the lines of, well, Messianic Jews aren't Christians, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're not believers, because how many people out there call themselves quote unquote Christians and they're not born again? When I was at Asbury Seminary in the spring of 2008, one of the things I noticed among some of my studies was, we saw the terminology Christ follower being used more and more in different theological works and different books. And of course, the reason that the terminology Christ follower was being used more than Christian is, anybody can call themselves a Christian. That doesn't mean they've experienced spiritual regeneration. And it doesn't mean that they're following Jesus. Because the important thing for anyone who professes faith in, and this is 2008, Jesus, is to follow him as a disciple. So that's why you saw a lot of theological works using the term Christ follower rather than just Christian. And I, of course, quickly adapted that and started employing the terminology Messiah follower. See, anybody can claim to be a believer. In fact, anybody can claim whatever label they want. It doesn't mean they're necessarily regenerated, much less that they are a Messiah follower as a disciple, because that is the most important thing more than anything else. And so I hope you look at Hello, Mrs. Rachel. We appreciate, when these kind of posts come out, because they can be used as teaching moments for those who don't often understand some of the challenges Messianic Jewish believers have, some of the things that they've got going against them because of being Jewish believers, the pressure to give up one's Jewish heritage and assimilate, the pressure to renounce Yeshua and go back to a Messiahless Judaism. And yeah, it's something we have to roll with as the Messianic community. We got to bring it to everyone's attention periodically. Okay, our next story. This is from Open Source Intel yesterday, May the 7th. Chinese President Xi Jinping says Taiwan's reunification with China is inevitable and unstoppable. Something new brewing, ... We don't know, but we do know that our attention right now in the world, you've got the conflict Russia and Ukraine, you've got the conflict Israel, Hamas, and also the Houthis. You've got the situation in Iran and ongoing negotiations. You've got a brewing conflict between India and Pakistan, and that could be a war before we know it. And we've got we've got China and Taiwan. What else are we going to have? It's just something, pray for peace in the world, please. We don't want to see war. We want to see a conclusion of potential tensions. Now, moving on, one of the biggest stories out there in the religious world, and it directly impacts every single person in the Messianic movement, the Michael Brown situation. And this was a video posted last night on YouTube. So May the 7th, Michael Brown has recused himself for a number of months since the various allegations have been issued against him. So if you've been following him on YouTube, different pre-recorded videos have been posted. This is a video where he discusses what has happened, his impending return to ministry. And this is an issue where he said that for the people who have followed him, of course, he's sorry. There are people who are coming to his defense. There are a lot of people who are very disappointed and they feel let down by him, and these people are going at it, and he stresses that people don't need to do that. I have said that because of our small size, people in the Messianic community have to work through this on their own. Here is the information. You decide for yourself. I am definitely, not to confuse you at all, I am on the side of, I feel very let down and disappointed by people like Michael Brown and some of the people who have come to his defense. I'm very disappointed in that. And I say that because I come from the tradition, both having been raised in evangelicalism and Protestantism, my parents on the leadership of the church, the administrative council of the church, my father being the designated lay leader, having seen a situation like this at our church as an 8-year-old and how it was handled, and then some of my own seminary training. I come from the tradition of the one strike policy. If you have any kind of sexual allegations levied against you, which are of substance, you probably are going to have to step down from ministry. It doesn't mean that you can't be forgiven. You can be forgiven. It just means you cannot return to ministry. And in this case, it appears that Michael Brown is going to be allowed to return to ministry. And that's why I say everyone has to work through this on their own. And something as significant as this, there's probably going to be future developments. Yes, I forgive Dr. Brown for some of his indiscretions in the past, but if he were in the tradition I come from and that I was raised in, he would not be permitted to return to ministry. And I know that I'm probably not alone in just being upset and disappointed. Everyone just has to work through it on their own. Okay, a few more stories. Of course, the big story right now is the new Pope. And this is the first post I saw on social media earlier today from Newsmax. Of course, here you see the white smoke coming from the Sistine Chapel. New Pope elected, white smoke billowed out of the Sistine Chapel chimney Thursday in Vatican City, indicating that the 267th Pope has been elected by the College of Cardinals, soon to be introduced to the world in St. Peter's Square. And a lot of our attention right now is doubtlessly focused on the new Pope, Leo the 14th, as we later found out. This was a total shock, a total surprise for many of us. We were looking for someone else. And of course, we're going to find out in the coming days more about who Cardinal Robert Prevost is, the first American Pope. And this was the first social media post of his picture, which came across my feed. Cardinal Robert Prevost is from Charlie Kirk, is the new Pope as Pope Leo the 14th. So a name going back to the 19th century. He's a Chicago native and just became the first American Pope. But he do some rudimentary research on him. He has had a lot of Roman Catholic ministry experience in Peru, so Latin American. I know that he has some Spanish or Latino background, so he's going to be fluent in Spanish, fluent in English. This should be very, very interesting. Is he going to be Francis 2.0? Is he going to be more conservative than Francis was? There are a lot of questions involving who Pope Leo the 14th is going to be. And doubtlessly, there are going to be a lot of people who speculate on him in regard to the end times. because many people, many premillennial readers of the book of Revelation have associated the figure of the false prophet with a possible Roman Catholic Pope. Now, it's not required by any means, yet at the same time, we are affected whether you like the Vatican or not. And believe me, I come from a very strong Protestant background. My paternal grandmother was Roman Catholic. She was excommunicated for marrying my grandfather. So our family hasn't had a great love of Catholicism. There are certainly many sincere individual Roman Catholic people. They have, I think, some kind of relationship with God. I think they're moral and ethical. They're the kind of people who, in the end of their life, they likely make their peace with God and scrape it into the kingdom, even though they spent a lot of their life praying to Mary and doing a lot of really crazy stuff. But yeah, we'll just wait and see. From what I have been able to gather regarding Robert Prevost, Cardinal Prevost, now Leo XIV, Pope Leo XIV, Catholicism could have done worse. We could have had someone who is a lot worse in the Vatican. But we'll just have to wait and see. This is somebody who came out of left field completely. And what it meant is he was probably some kind of a compromise candidate between the conservatives and the liberals in the Roman Catholic Church. But this story is going to dominate a lot of our discussions in the coming days as we figure out who this guy is and what he's going to do. And let's not leave the factor off the table that there are some Messianic Jewish leaders who have had relations with the Vatican. Whether you like that or not, how is it going to affect some of their discussions and academic dialogues and what have you? The subject of the Vatican, of Catholicism, raises a lot of strong emotions in the Messianic community. All right, so that concludes some of our news roundup for today. Indeed, there are a lot of things we need to be praying for before the Lord right now. A lot of things just happening, which are definitely beyond our control. But the Lord uses these to get our attention, to get us to focus in on Him, focus in on matters of the kingdom. What do we need to be doing? We, as regenerated men and women, followers of Israel's Messiah, have access to the power of heaven. We have access to the same power which resurrected Yeshua from the dead, even with the general resurrection yet to take place. And how many of us need to say, Lord, we need that power active in our lives today? Are things going to get worse? Is this train going to just fly off the tracks? Or are we going to be entering into a season of some peace, some calm, which we can maximize for your service? So a lot of things to be praying for before the Lord. And along with that, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers and encouragement, and yes, donations toward all of our ministry efforts. Without you, would we be able to continue? We go day to day with all of the new question marks regarding the future and regarding what the Lord would have us speak about, the Lord would have us address. We will see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.